The Cipher Brief, because national security is everyone's business.
One of the areas we want to dig in a little deeper over the next few minutes is that of new alliances. And we're going to be tackling this from a few different angles. Of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine earlier this year saw a huge shift in global alliances. It also created alliances in cyber we hadn't seen before. Joining me now to talk about these new alliances and the next generation for the next few minutes is Thomas Ritt. Thomas is the founding director at Alpovich Institute for Cybersecurity Studies at Johns Hopkins University, SAIS. Ritt is also an author and wrote the 2020 book, Active Measures, A Sweeping History of Disinformation. He also wrote the 2016 book, Rise of the Machines. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi.
All right. And so I'd love to just turn the floor to you now and get your take on how we've seen some of these global alliances really stand up and what we can see in the future.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And just to make sure that how long would you like me to speak?
Let's go for 10 minutes.
Oh, 10 minutes? Okay. And then will there be time for engagement with you or the audience as well?
We can work that in.
Perfect. I always like that. So I thought as I was reflecting on this session this morning to prepare, I thought to myself, okay, maybe it's worth reflecting on what is really new in this space right now, because I'm doing a lot of interviews right now for a history book that I'm writing, a history book on the rise of threat intelligence as a discipline, as a standalone discipline, at the intersection really between government and the private sector. So there are many key dates that are coming up. In February, it will be 10 years after the famous APT1 report. It will also be later next year, it will be 10 years after the Snowden leaks already. And it's already been 5 years after NotPetya, the biggest cyber attack, and most damaging cyber attack in history so far. I think that still is probably accurate to say. So what has changed and what has stayed the same? And I'll come to alliances in just a moment here. I think it's remarkable, really, that in those 10 years, in my experience as an author working in this space, and as somebody doing interviews with practitioners in the private sector and in government, it's just absolutely stunning how much we have opened up as a community. People are no longer, speaking about, I remember doing research on Moonlight Maze a couple of years ago, like 7 or 8 years ago. And at the time it was still a little bit verboten to speak about command and control infrastructure that the FBI and others were watching. That is no longer the case. I think we have just so much more information out there, highly specific, case-specific information about specific attacks, operations, and how they are uncovered. So that, I think, is a huge change that I think points to something that is not obvious, because what I said so far is pretty much obvious to all of you. What's not obvious, in my view, is that where is the information that is being shared so much more openly? Because it's not public necessarily. In fact, often it is not public. Because what we've seen in my experience is this space that is in the proprietary realm, where companies sell information to other companies, proprietary threat intelligence reports, that has ballooned and become much bigger. So once you're in a trusted community, either because you're paying for it or because you know people, because you're a member of that investigative community, then suddenly an entire world opens up to you. Well, that is not the case if you're a journalist or if you're an academic. Then that makes it much harder. And add to this trend that the proprietary space, the traffic light protocol space, is growing. Add to this another, what I think, problematic trend of the past year only, and that is, Kaspersky as a company obviously is a very controversial player, and more controversial now than it ever has been because of Russia's new pariah or renewed pariah role. But the company played a really important role for a long time as an outside view, if you like, on many important cases the Kaspersky reporting was among the best, among the most detailed for many years, but it's effectively turning into something else and possibly going away at some point, which really highlights another interesting feature that is non-obvious. And that brings us to alliances. Think of the way attribution has changed, the way the evolution has taken place of how things are how adversaries are exposed. Take the APT1 report almost 10 years ago as a really important milestone, not the first one, but the most significant and most detailed one. Have we seen other APT1 reports since? And I would say we have seen obviously many reports, but the level of detail, the level of granularity in reporting has arguably declined over the years, not increased as you might expect, because a lot of information is being shared in a proprietary space, not publicly. So what we see instead, since NotPetya approximately 5 years ago, is that attribution is done by alliance. So the US government, the UK government share information with allies and then step forward jointly at the same time with coordinated press statements, Five Eyes and beyond, attributing a specific operation to a specific adversary. You can apply that to various cases. The Viasat KA-SAT incident in Ukraine comes to mind in that context as an example. That is interesting. So attribution by alliance versus, and obviously this is a bit of a bumper sticker analysis, but attribution by alliance versus attribution by detail, because it's tricky. You know, will attribution by alliance, perhaps backed up by an indictment, which is obviously a US method. No other country replicates the indictments as a form of attribution statement in the same way, uses its criminal justice system in the same way. The UK doesn't do it, for example. What is the nature of that evidence that is made public there, or not made public, just replaced by a coordinated alliance statement? Will it stand up in a court of law, in a civil trial, for example, in an insurance trial, as we have seen? And the answer there is still untested. Probably their attribution by alliance and an indictment, perhaps to back it, quote unquote, back it up, is not enough in terms of putting the evidence out there. I'm just making a statement about the quality of evidence, not about attribution, about the accuracy of the attribution statement. I do not doubt for a minute, obviously, that NotPetya, for example, was done by GRU because the governments that have thrown their weight behind that attribution statement is significant. But the quality of the evidence is a different matter. Can I independently, as an expert, verify this fact that NotPetya was a GRU operation? The answer is, independently as an expert, I cannot retrace the trail of evidence because it's not public. So that's an interesting challenge that we have in front of us as a community that I think will come to bear if we talk about alliances. Why has France not joined any US-led or Five Eyes-led attribution statement, as far as I know? Please correct me if I'm getting this wrong. Why is Germany oftentimes so reluctant to join these attribution statements? Is that for political reasons or for evidentiary reasons? We don't really have good answers to these questions. So these are some considerations. I'll just add a final thought and then I'll stop because I think I'm running up against the 10-minute mark soon. And that is the whole conversation on influence operations, active influence operations and disinformation has changed over the years quite drastically. Obviously, it was almost absent up until 2016 with the great election interference of 2016. And then it spiked and became sort of almost a cottage industry by itself, the disinformation investigation research scene. And then by now we're in this highly politicized phase where disinformation is considered to be a problem, but it's also blurring the lines between domestic, disinformation and foreign disinformation. See what happened to DHS's Disinformation Governance Board. So that, to me, is an interesting development to watch because clearly on the one hand, we know now collectively have understood that disinformation has always been part of advanced cyber operations, sometimes on a strategic level, but often just on a tactical and operational level to deceive, because these are intelligence operations most of the time.
So I'm going to jump in, Thomas, because we are up against our
Yep.
line. But I will tell you that you've given us a great vision into this. At the same time, I think you volunteered for a SIG session just on this subject, because I think we could go a lot deeper in this, and you really have a lot of us on the edge of our seats on how much further we could go. So I want to first thank you for your time today, and just know that we're going to circle back and get you back again. This was a great conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.